Capital Farm Credit is the title sponsor and has been for multiple years because they see the value in this conference. You know, they saw this years ago when they saw so many people coming and it growing year after year. Our first speaker today is a person I am proud to call friend. His name is Travis Thorne. Travis grew up in New Mexico, went to school at Texas Tech and was the master writer at Texas Tech. Got a degree in business administration and ag economics. I'm thankful that during that time he also came and spent several months at our house interning at R.A. Brown Ranch. And we saw a lot of great promise in Travis Thorne as a young man. And over the last 20 years, he has invested his career at Capital Farm Credit in helping ranch families make investments to grow their businesses. And he is blessed with a wonderful wife, Lori, a beautiful daughter, and an outstanding son that are in junior high and high school. And I tell you what, you know, we always like to do business with people that we know and with people that we trust. And with Cody King and Travis Thorne, those guys at Capital Farm Credit, those are guys to ride the river with. And with that, please welcome our corporate sponsor, the title sponsor for this event, Capital Farm Credit, represented by Travis Thorne.
Good morning. And wow, Donald, thank you. That's call you my friend too. Thank you. And Andy, the title sponsor, thank you for letting us have that. That's a privilege. We consider that to be a privilege. And you know, today I would like to talk a little bit about Capital Farm Credit in general, talk a little bit about the beef conference, and then really start to get down into the trenches of just finance. And Andy kind of stole my thunder this morning because I was thinking about Lee and last year's prayer, and you know, it was pretty awesome because Lee got up here and he was so intentional about his prayer, so intentional about God, we need the rain. Bring us the rain, we need the rain. And I could just remember we were all trying to get out of here and load our stuff, and we could see the rain coming. And I tell you what, Lee's prayer was so intentional, I was convinced last night that his prayer was for this year also. So we got rain not only last year, but we got rain this year. Because of Lee's prayer, and God delivers. God always delivers. So thank you, Lee. Appreciate that very much. About the beef conference in general, I can tell you Capital Farm Credit is proud to be that title sponsor because you are our customers. We believe really strong in the livestock, the beef industry, and you know, this is who we want to support. And you know, we talk about the average age of the ag producer being 60 plus. Well, looking around this room, I have a lot of hope that that's going to change. We've got a lot of young people, and I know you made a choice, you made a decision to come and be part of the beef conference, and I'm proud of that. But I look around the room and I look about all the vendors, and you know, so many times we think of those various vendors as competition, but that's really just opposite of what they are. They're a resource, they're an option. And the value of these beef conferences and this time together is the fellowship with each other, the ability to network, the ability to gain lifelong friendships and relationships, because in this industry, we're only good as one another, as our friendships, the network we have. And so each of you attending, I charge you with build relationships, have conversations, shake hands with each other. All these vendors are here to become a resource for you as you migrate in the future for your business. And I promise you, the value that you get from this and the time that you've invested, you'll have an amazing return on that investment. And so thank you for being here. Thank you for letting Capital Farm Credit, Andy, be the title sponsor. It's something we're very proud of and something that we don't take for granted. So thank you very much for that. Amen. We are on for next year. Yes, sir. I have a quick video. The guys are going to see if they'll play a little bit about Capital Farm Credit.
Agriculture. It's the backbone of what makes our world go round. For more than a century, Capital Farm Credit has been providing agricultural financing to Texans. Our mission goes beyond making loans. We put agriculture first. We're your partner. We're your trusted advisor. We're your friend. Because together, we're better.
Awesome. That's right. Together we're better. So let's talk about Capital Farm Credit, just a little bit of general. For those of you who don't know, we're going to take a little history, take a step back and talk about the history of the farm credit system. For those of you who don't know, 1916, President Woodrow Wilson created the Farm Credit Act. There was a dire need of a source of financing for rural America, for farmers and ranchers. And so President Woodrow Wilson started the Farm Credit Act in 1916, and over the years, this thing has migrated into what they have today. And some of you are probably familiar with the old Federal Land Bank or Production Credit Association, PCA. So we had the short term, we had the long-term financing. That's all merged together into an ACA where the various farm credit associations can provide more resources to our customers, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. This is Capital Farm Credit's footprint. All of the colored areas is our chartered lending territory. Even the white area is serviced by other farm credit associations, so no one is untouched. Everybody has the ability to borrow through farm credit. We service 192 counties, over 63 offices, so all the dots represent one of our offices. You can see up there in the top right-hand corner, right here, the footprint we're at, we've got Pampa, and we've got Canadian, and we've got Perryton. We're about $11.5 billion in loan volume. That makes us the largest association in the Farm Credit District. It makes us approximately the sixth largest in the United States. I know that maybe bigger isn't always better, but it is when it comes to financial strength and stability, right? Because we want to be here today, and we want to be here in the future for our customers. So we've built the kind of financial strength that we need to sustain, right? That's a big word in the ag industry, sustainability, and we want to be here. What I'm mostly proud is we are a cooperative. We are member-owned. Our borrowers become stockholders of Capital Farm Credit. Approximately 23,000 member owners in Texas today make up Capital Farm Credit. Why is that important? Because they're the decision makers of Capital Farm Credit, right? The decisions we make at Capital Farm Credit is based on the majority of the 23,000 stockholders. They're the ones that make the decisions to help us decide on how we're going to operate. So why finance, right? Financing is a tool, just like many of the vendors in here. There are various tools to help you navigate through your business. Well, first of all, you're going to need a partner, right? We know our inputs are very expensive. It costs a lot of money to raise our respective commodity to a point of sale, right? You got to get your stockers to a point of sale. You got to get your calves to a point of sale. That's very costly. The inputs are more than they ever have been. And so you need a partner. Source of capital. What are the ways of you getting capital? Well, you can inherit capital. You can be given capital. I guess you could technically steal it, but that's not something that I would recommend. So we talked about inheritance. We talked about raising capital. You can get it through your earnings, right? You can earn your capital, or you can borrow, right? So we're a source of capital. That's what financing is a source of capital so that you can spread your money out over a longer period of time and help get your respective commodity to a point of sale. Industry knowledge. This is something that we talked about, and really industry knowledge and subject matter experts kind of go together. And what I mean by that is, just as Donald talked about, and I'm proud that we have approximately 12 of our employees back there in the back, is we are our customer. What do I mean by that? Well, most of us grew up 4-H, FFA, farming family, ranching family. That makes us relatable to our customers, right? You got a customer and they want to have a conversation about you financing their cow-calf operation or their row crop operation, whatever that might be. we speak that language, right? We know what they're talking about. We can understand the prices and the stresses and the risks that they have. That really adds that industry knowledge. And this is what we do. Like, this is a niche market. We don't diversify in a lot of, we don't have deposits. We don't have a lot of stuff. We finance agriculture, farmers, ranchers, rural Texans. Talked a little bit about the cooperative structure and philosophy. I'm going to talk a little more in detail about that and really the benefits of that cooperative structure. The biggest benefit to a cooperative in dealing with the farm credit system, and specifically capital farm credit, is we return our profits to our customers through what they call a patronage program, or in essence, a cooperative return. Same thing, just different way of saying it. Because of our performance, in 2022, we paid $127 million in cash, and we declared an additional $142 million of allocated equities to our members, totaling a record of $270 million in cooperative returns for that year. Those are big numbers, right? We talked about 23,000 stockholders. They capitalize our association. They help us get to that point. As the largest agricultural lender in Texas, we've returned $2.4 billion in cash and allocated equities since 2006. Now let's talk about that just for a minute. That's a lot of money, right? That's a lot of money because it's important for us to talk about being a cooperative, being member-owned, but it's equally important for us to give that money back, right? We want to give that money back. Our borrowers, our stockholders help us become profitable. It's our desire, if we're truly going to preach to be a cooperative, that we give that money back. We're going to start kind of taking that down to maybe the per customer level. Total cooperative returns represent about 95% of our total earnings. So almost 100%, 95% of our total net earnings we are giving back to our customers. That's huge. Cash and allocated equities paid through the program returned approximately 27% of the interest paid by our members and effectively reduced the average cost of borrowing by approximately 1.49%. That's important also because we're in a higher interest rate market, right? The days of the 4 and 5%, that ship has sailed. Those days are gone. And really, they probably never should have been there, right? We're back in those higher rates. The more money we can put back to offset that higher rate is really important. I don't know how easy this is to see, but if you'll look over here in these calendar years since 2006 all the way through this last year, 2022, we've returned that $2.4 billion that we talked about. This column right here, return is a percent of your total earnings, north of 95% that we've actually given back to our stockholders. And then we have our patronage program broke up into two different deals. So the way we handle it is in the very first year following when you start doing business with us is we return about 40 to 45% of that patronage declaration in terms of cash. A check comes in the mail representing the cash paid in that respective year. So now your question is, okay, what are you doing with the other 55 to 60% that you're not paying at that respective time in terms of your patronage declaration? That's being deposited into what they call allocated equities, which means it's non-qualified. What does non-qualified mean? It's not taxable unto the stockholder until it is paid. Why would you want to pay taxes on something that you've yet to receive? So ours is non-qualified. The law says we have to wait. If you're a cooperative and you participate in allocated equities, you must wait, in our case, about 9 years before you could pay that to the customer. We're required to follow some GAAP accounting principles, first in, first out. And so immediately you start getting a cash payment, which at today's higher rates is almost 200 basis points off of your interest rate. So if your interest rate's 8%, just with that cash payment that you get the very next year, reduces it to roughly 6%, 200 basis points decrease. But you're also getting money deposited into your allocated equity account, earmarked in your name, paid at some point in the future, approximately about 9 years. You get that amount, now you got an additional maybe 200 to 225 basis points. So an example where your interest rate might be 8%, we've already reduced it to 6% because of the cash patronage. Now we're going to reduce it to roughly 4% based on the retirement allocated equities whenever that comes. The other thing about that respective delay is, think about this. If we've got a delay in retiring allocated equities, when you pay our loan in full, for the next 9 years, you're going to get a check from us. You no longer owe Capital Farm Credit any money, but you're also getting a retirement allocated equities because we're trying to take that balance to zero. If you look over here, we talked about the interest paid, percent of the interest paid, so approximately 27% of your interest paid is coming back to you. We kind of just show the impact of any respective interest rate and what that drop means. Oop. So we also have some tools, because I know it's kind of complicated and sometimes it's hard to understand. And I know this slide may be a little bit harder to read, but in essence, we've got a tool to provide to prospective customers that, hey, if you were to get a loan, and we can show the example up there in the circle red of $500,000, and you had a 6% interest rate, your amortization is principal and interest, where your payments are equal, and the relationship between principal and interest changes over time, and you did over 20 years, this tool demonstrates exactly how much money you're getting and the effective reduction of your interest rate. So this tool is in place, so if someone calls and say, hey, I'm having a hard time understanding your patronage, can you spell this out for us? If you're like me, you're very visual. When you can see it on paper, it starts to make a lot more sense. All right, so we've talked about the patronage. Let's get back to financing. And I actually prioritize the 5 C's of credit. Sometimes you hear maybe the 4 C's of credit, but we think that number 1, character, is probably the most important. So I actually put these in order of importance. We'll run through the 5 C's of credit. I think you guys all would agree, in the beef industry and the ag industry, character might actually be the most important of all 5 C's. I don't know if any of you have heard about it. We have a podcast now. It can be found on Spotify, on our website, called Capital Roots. We have 6 episodes of that podcast out. It's really awesome because it's a lot of industry leaders out in the marketplace. But recently, we had Emily Lochner and Scott Williamson with Texas Southwest Cattle Raisers. Some of you might know them. They were on our podcast. And Scott Williamson, who is over all of the Special Rangers, he had a very profound statement that I wanted to mention. And his statement was, during that podcast, is this is an integrity industry. The beef cattle industry is an industry of integrity. That's what we're talking about right there, character, right? We have got to be able to trust and have confidence in our borrowers. Equally, those borrowers have to have trust in us as a lender, right? And we've got to be able to proceed with integrity, trust, and the ability to help them manage through their respective business. Capacity. What's capacity? We feel like that's the second most important, because based on your earnings and your ability to generate income, that's how you're going to pay your debt back, right? That's how you're going to service your loan. We are an income-based lender. We care about earnings more than anything else. Now, that becomes a little bit more of a science, right? Because you're basing that decision on either some projected earnings based on income tax returns or records that you might have, but we're also basing that on what the future holds, right? What do you think you're going to sell your stockers for? What do you think you're going to sell your wean calves for? And how much is it going to cost for you to get from the point of origination on that commodity to the point of sale? So it's a little bit of science that goes into those projections based on the conversations that we have with our borrowers and the tools that they provide us. Capital. That is your financial statement. That is the investment or the equity that you have in your respective assets. And we're going to dig a little deeper into a balance sheet to help better understand the capital part of it. Conditions. These are various ways that we can minimize risk. If you think about it, if you have a house, would you get insurance on your house? Yes, because if you lose that asset, you want to recover those funds, right? And you're probably going to have to rebuild. No different than a piece of equipment. If you have a $500,000 tractor out there, we're probably going to require you to get insurance on that tractor. Some things happen, and if we lose that tractor, you've got to be able to pay your loan back, and you've got to be able to get a new tractor. So we have various conditions that we put in place to help mitigate risk. The last, and probably some of you think it's the most important, I'm actually going to say that it's the least important from the way we look at it, is collateral. Collateral is the assets being used to secure the loan. Why do we collateralize a loan? Things happen, right? We're in the ag industry. Mother Nature isn't very cooperative sometimes. Things don't always go as planned in your operation. That is plan Z. That's how we're going to try to make whole and pay the debt to zero if something happens. Obviously, in the beef industry, we'll collateralize that with the operation itself, whether it be the cow herd, whether it be the stockers that you got on feed, whatever that looks like. Collateral is how we're going to also offset the risk. But like I said earlier, collateral is somewhat of a nuisance and maybe not the most important, because if you think about it, if you got a real estate loan, you got to go do an appraisal, you got to get title work, you got to file a deed of trust, all right? You got to do all that. If it's a short-term loan where we're secured by chattel, which is equipment or some sort of personal property or a beef cattle, think about that. We got to go do an inspection. We got to file a security agreement. We got to do a UCC filing with the Secretary of State. There's a lot that goes into collateral. Plus, I think we all know that sometimes cattle tend to walk away and disappear, all right? But again, it's a tool in place to help offset the risk in the loan. Types of loans that we have. And this, the first couple might be a little more relevant to the beef conference today. Operating loans. So an operating loan is a tool for us to be able to finance the input costs that you have to grow your commodity to a point of sale. And we have a couple different, because you really want to structure the loan to align with the respective operation. So let's talk about that. If you are a cow-calf person, and let's say all you ever have is spring-born calves, and they sell later in the year, really you've only got one commodity, right? And you only have one set of input costs. So if we talk about the second one, which is a master note, that is one time out, one time back in, right? Because all we're going to do is fund the input cost for that respective calf crop until they're sold, right? So we fund. You sell your commodity, you pay us back, loan's down to zero, we're ready for the next cycle. The first one, the revolving line of credit, that's more like a credit card, right? Because it goes like this. So think about, maybe you got a variety of different commodities. Maybe you got a cow-calf operation. Maybe you got row crop. Maybe you have a hay operation, stocker operation, right? That isn't a one-time input cost, and that's not a one-time point of sale, right? So you could have a $100,000 revolving line of credit. If that thing revolves 10 times, you've technically borrowed $1 million from us, right? Because it's gone like this, right? You've borrowed your stuff for your stockers. You got them on feed for 60 days. You sell them, pay us down. You're ready to buy the next set, right? Revolving line of credit. That one gives you a little bit more freedom, but the goal is to keep the money going as you need it for your operation. We also offer some intermediate term or installment loans. If you think about this is based on the useful life of the collateral. And so if you think about intermediate term loan, this is more for capital purchase. So if you're buying, let's say we want to buy a set of Red Angus heifers from R.A. Brown Ranch, okay? And we're going to turn those into cows, and we're going to keep them in our operation for a long period of time. Well, first of all, they're not going to have a calf crop for a couple years. And then when they do, generally they're not going to make enough money in that first year to pay that back, all right? So we might put the purchase of those heifers, those red Angus heifers, on a term loan for 5 years, right? So that whenever you do sell the calves off those heifers, and you sell those calves and they become cows and you sell them, then you take that money and you make that annual payment associated with that purchase. Same would apply for equipment, right? You can't go out there and buy a $500,000 tractor and expect to pay that in the first year, right? So we're going to put those on a 7 or 10-year term loan, right? Because that, even though that's a depreciable asset and it may drop a little bit in value over time, there's no way we can structure the loan where you're going to pay that back in that first year. So we have those type of loans where you're making capital purchase for personal property. And again, the terms of those loans need to align with the type of item that you're buying. And then last, and probably one of the more popular loans at Capital Farm Credit is long-term real estate loans. We can amortize with maturities anywhere from 5 to 30 years. We can fix rates anywhere from 2 to 30 years. And so depending upon what you're buying and what your goals are, we've got a lot of different options. But again, real estate purchases tend to be quite a bit more dollars, right? And so we want to try to stretch those out. Plus, we're no longer talking about a depreciable asset. We're talking about an asset that's going to more than likely appreciate over time, all right? And so we're willing to go longer just to help spread out the payments and lower that obligation to you. So whenever you come to Capital Farm Credit and you make the phone call and you want to start those conversations, our responsibility is to add value to that and start helping you, guide you through that process. And so what we expect you to do is to come in with a plan. The what and why and how much, right? So you come to us and you say, hey, I really want to try to get into the beef industry and I want to buy some cows and really try to get started. Okay, well, explain to us what, why, what's your plan? How do you plan? What's your management plan? What is your plan for paying this back? Those are all the kind of things that we want to know. And it's not that you haven't thought about it, but again, we talked earlier about being a resource, right? We want to help you as a partner to navigate through that process. We're also going to need some information about you and your upcoming operation. So income records. What income records? Well, tax returns, right? Everybody, or most everybody files a tax return, I hope, and you file it timely. We want to know, based on other sources that you have, how you plan to pay this back. So we're going to look at income records. Sometimes we'll use a profit and loss statement. So, we're here in the middle of 2023. You won't have any tax records or income records for 2023. So we'll use an income statement or we'll use a profit and loss statement, which is just a year-to-date accounting of where your number's at. And we'll try to compare that to prior years to understand the trends as to what is going on in your source, in your respective operation. Balance sheet. I'm going to talk a little bit more about a balance sheet here in a little bit, but a balance sheet or financial statement is a snapshot in time. So as of today, April 26, 2023, what is Andy's balance sheet, right? That's a snapshot in time of your assets and your respective liabilities, which will get us to an equity position. Again, we're going to talk about that in the future. Some of you that are a little more further along in your careers, you tend to have a little bit more equity. But I see a lot of younger folks in here, sometimes that's a little backwards, right? You tend to have a little bit more debt than you have assets, right? The plan is we want to see that trending in a positive way and changing over time. We talked about the inventory. When you come in, we're going to say, okay, what is your plan to collateralize this loan? How do you plan what is your collateral? And typically when we're asking about collateral, we want to know the condition of the collateral. We want to know the weight. We want to know the health, right? We want to understand the quality of that collateral. And then we expect you to be open, honest, and receptive to ideas. And we're going to do the same for you, because think about this. You're the manager of the operation, right? So we expect you to have some manager stewardship but we also want you to have some financial stewardship. You know, too many times producers focus so much on their operation, right? The decisions day to day in terms of their management, taking care of the animals. When are we putting bulls out? When are we breeding these heifers? When are we going to sell? Do we going to contract? All those type of deals. But what they're forgetting about is the financial stewardship behind that operation, right? How are things going? Am I selling them to a point where I'm maximizing my profits in the market? Is my balance sheet getting stronger? Am I building equity? Am I reducing debt? Those are the kind of things that we expect for our customers, because we want them to not only have the strong management abilities, but we also want them to have the financial responsibilities that are really important. So I don't know, this is going to be a little hard to see, but we're going to kind of go through it, and I'm going to dig a little deeper because I really think that this has some important things to look at. So we talked about a balance sheet. And at the top, you've got Jane Doe Rancher, and at the bottom, you got John Doe Rancher, all right? And so let's talk about this for a minute. So over on this left-hand column is the asset side, right? And as we go through it, we've got short-term assets, we've got some intermediate assets, and we've got some long-term assets. Short-term assets. What's short-term assets? Short-term assets is something that can be converted into cash within 12 months, right? Checking, savings, CDs, money markets, accounts receivable, short-term accounts receivable, inventories, right? Your calf crop, right? Your plan is to turn that calf crop into cash. So those are the things that we're going to list over there on the left-hand side. As you get into your intermediate assets, you've got automobiles, boats, RVs, your cows, right? Your breeding livestock. All of those things are intermediate assets, and then we got our long-term assets. What's our long-term assets? Real estate, right? Or investments in long-term partnerships, cooperation, something like that. So if you look for Jane Doe Rancher, I believe she's sitting over here at $7,450,000 of total assets for Jane Doe Rancher. Let's get over here to the right side. What's the right side? Those are the liabilities. Those are the debts against any of those assets. So what's your short-term liabilities? Those are credit card debts, right? They're typically due within a year. You've got your operating loan. If you look, Jane Doe Rancher has a $500,000 operating loan offset by the $900,000 worth of calf crop over there. So in essence, she's got $400,000 worth of equity in her calf crop based on her operating loan. We've got some intermediate debts. It looks like Jane's got maybe a debt on an automobile, also on some machinery, and also some notes receivable, something a little bit longer term. So what you're seeing is you got your total liabilities and you've got your net worth position. So if we look based on Jane Doe Rancher's balance sheet up at the top, she's got working capital of $424,000. What makes the difference between that? Total current assets minus total current liabilities. That is Jane Doe Rancher's working capital. But she also has a current ratio, which is the total assets divided by the total liabilities, of 1.85 to 1, right? That's positive, right? Because she's got equity in those current assets. What is her net worth? Her net worth is the difference between her total assets and her total liabilities for a net worth of $6,699,000, which represents owner's equity of 89.92%. That's a considerable amount of equity on that balance sheet, right? Jane Doe Rancher has done really good for herself, and she's built equity over time. Equity is if I sold all of those assets on the left and I liquidated all of those liabilities on the right, I'm going to walk away with $6.69 million, which is 89% owner's equity. All right? Now let's get down here to John Doe Rancher. All right? John Doe Rancher's numbers aren't quite as big because Jane's always take care of business and John Doe's out spending money, right? So we get over here to John Doe Rancher, and all I did, if you haven't figured it out, is I took a zero off every one of those numbers. So I took a 0 off everything and reduced it by 0 in every one of those columns. Again, we've got the total assets on the left. We've got total liability on the right. But what you're going to see is the uniqueness and the similarities and the difference. So we talk about working capital. So in John Doe's working capital, he's got $42,400 of working capital, right? So that's the difference between total assets and total liabilities. Considerably less than Jane Doe Rancher, but they got the same current ratio, right? Exact same current ratio. But you got to remember, behind those ratios, you got to understand what those ratios mean. The numbers behind those ratios is really what's important to us. Because if you just look and think, oh, gosh, John Doe Rancher, he only has $42,000 worth of working capital. He's not as strong as Jane, right? So we don't want to just look at the ratios. We want to look at the hard numbers behind that. Same in terms of the total balance sheet. John Doe Rancher has a net worth of $669,000, right? He sells his assets, liquidates his debts. He walks away with $669,000 compared to Jane's nearly $7 million, but they got the same owner's equity, right? So it's not just when we're looking at this stuff, and not just when we're looking at this stuff, when you're looking at this stuff, you really got to understand what these numbers mean, right? Because here's the thing is there's going to be a point where you're not going to be a rancher anymore, and you're going to want to retire, and you're going to want to move on to something else. You've got to understand when you walk away, what does all this mean, right? And we look at this, so next year on April 26th of 2024, we're going to compare that balance sheet to this balance sheet, and we're going to put those together, and we're going to say, okay, in terms of Jane or John, what's their earned net worth? Are they gaining equity? Are they, because we want you to be profitable, right? We want you to grow in your operation. We want you to build assets, equity in your assets. We want you to be reducing debt, right? So we're looking at trends also. All right, so we've worked through that process. We think that Jane and John are good credit risk, and we want to do business with Jane and John. So we've approved the loan, move forward. Now you're a stockholder of Capital Farm Credit. You've now joined one of those 23,000 stockholders of Capital Farm Credit. So let's talk about some of the benefits. This is straight from our website. We talked about the agricultural loans that we offer. We also offer some risk protection services. We have an insurance group, insurance services, where we offer various crop insurance. I mean, yesterday, I believe CattleFax was talking about fats at $1.72. I think we're talking feeders, maybe pushing $2.20, $2.40. Has anybody even got those kind of prices before? No, right? So risk protection, right? You want to protect the ability to get that price or an attractive price whenever you go to sell that respective commodity. So we got we got the LRP, livestock risk protection. I got some friends back there in the commodity business. There's all kinds of different tools that we could use to protect, right? You've got your options, you got your puts. We're trying to, the LRP allows you to go ahead and lock in a price today. You don't have to do it for 100%. You could do it for a fraction of that, right? You might have 100 calves that are going to be selling in October. Well, maybe you take 10% of that calf crop and you get an LRP contract on that, okay? Or 50%. And then in a month, go ahead and do the other. Or let that 50% stay exposed to the cash market. So there's all kinds of different things that we can offer. We also offer the range forage. So, we've been in a drought, right? And so Kerry Franks, our insurance agent with Capital Farm Credit, he's got a really amazing tool that helps you navigate and understand, the different areas in Texas and where your farm is and where they measure precipitation and help you understand the different segments that you can buy in terms of drought protection, right? Because, hey, if the tools are out there, you might as well maximize them, right? Take advantage of them. We've got a huge initiative going right now regarding YBS. What is YBS? Young, beginning, and small. We talked about it earlier that the average age of today's producer is something north of 60 years old, right? That's not favorable for our industry. That's not sustainable for our industry. You know, we've got some tables in the back of some college kids. We've got high school kids. We have taken an approach that we really want to put a lot of emphasis on young, beginning, and small. What does that mean? Well, it means that we want to work with these kids if they want to start to enter the business and they need that capital that they can't get from their family or elsewhere. We want to promote that. We want to offer some loan products that help them get started, right? Not only does it help them get started, but it starts to help them understand the financial stuff that we talked about. They need to start understand balance sheets, income statements. What does this operation look like? What are my inputs? I mean, all that kind of stuff, right? You can't just jump in and go buy you a set of cows and expect it to work if you don't understand everything that goes into that. So not only do we have some loan initiatives, but we're also doing some educational. I think in September we're having a conference in Lubbock where we're going to invite a lot of young producers, and we've got an amazing agenda with some very important speakers that could really help add value to our YBS program and the opportunity for those kids to learn some education, again, to help be a resource for their future operation. We offer some, again, we don't do deposits, but we offer some online banking tools. You know, we're in the age of technology. You know, a lot of times I hear, oh, my granddad's 75 years old, but he don't like to use a cell phone and he don't like to do online banking. Well, guess what? He's got the most technical GPS equipment in his tractor. I think if you just show him the way, he'll embrace that technology and he'll utilize it. And so we want to have those tools in place so our customers feel like we have ways to navigate through our business and to make it easier. Because typically when a producer needs money, when do they need money? Yesterday, right? Not in a month from now. So we want to utilize the tools and the technologies in place to make sure that we're providing value to our customers and giving them access to the funds that they need when they need it. As we get to the end of this, I wanted to go back, and again, I wanted to thank Andy for the opportunity to be the title sponsor. This is really important to us because it's our ability to really partner with leaders in the ag industry, with the producers, and just have that, just to be able to tell our story. And again, those of you in this room, we know you made a choice to come here. And there's some amazing vendors, the ones outside, the ones in this room. All of these are just options for you. They're options no different than if you go to the grocery store and you walk down the cereal aisle. You know, you got all these different options, right? Because you're going to pick the one that best fits you and your family. That's no different than this room. The people sitting at these tables, those are your neighbors. Those are your fellow producers. They have a lot of resources that could add value to your operation, just like these vendors in this room. So again, we really appreciate the opportunity to be the title sponsor. It's something we're very proud of, and we don't take it light. Those of you that may do business with Capital Farm Credit in the room, thank you for your business, because it's you that help us be successful as a lender in Texas. All right, thank you for your time. Is there any questions?
So, Travis, I have a question. Let me get you the mic. In Agrilife, we have worked now for almost 10 years since I've been here to try specifically with cow-calf producers to kind of relate to this. My granddad was an old rancher in Fisher County. He started when he was in the 8th grade. And he didn't have a college education, and he ranched out of his shirt pocket. He didn't have a lot of records. What he really knew was how much money he had in the bank. And so in today's world, and you talked about this some, the technology that we have, one of the things in Agrilife that we think is so important that ranchers understand exactly what their costs are in their cattle operation. So specifically in cow-calf production, that cow is our factory. And we need to know exactly what it costs to run that cow for a year, all the costs, including depreciation on that cow. So does Capital Farm Credit help the ranchers look into those kind of things and help them build a model to help them really understand what their true costs are so that they can truly see what their bottom line is, not just how much money's in the bank?
100%, Andy. And I think that's the resource and the subject matter expert that we want to be to our producers, because it's real easy, for us day to day to sit at the computer and analyze that information and dig through those numbers and come up with the information that Andy's asking about, like, what does this cow cost? Where's the break even? Where does she need to be? Like, what does she need to be producing? We have all that stuff, right, at our office, but in the past we were guilty of not having those conversations with our customer, not empowering them to understand the things that we understand, right? And really, if you involve your customer, instead of just saying, hey, yes, we can help you, no, we can't help you, it's so much more than that, right? That conversation is so much more than that. Let me show you what we're looking at. Let me show you what's important. Compare this to the industry standards. Compare this to the industry standards on your balance sheet, your income statement, your respective operation, right? Because we want to help you add value. But you got to understand the numbers, like exactly what Andy's saying. You've got to understand the numbers and the trends. So today's numbers, but you got to understand next year's numbers and next year's numbers. And are you trending in a direction that is adding value to your operation so that you're positioned for sustainability in the future?
Good, thank you. Other questions? Other questions? All right. Now, like you mentioned, it's complex. If it wasn't complex, everybody'd be doing it, right? So if they have questions, can they go back to your booth and touch base with you or Cody or any of your team back? You've got a lot of folks here, right?
We have a lot of folks here because we want to be there to help you. So we have a big staff in the back of some very educated and knowledgeable information to any of you. So if you just have questions, we felt like helping someone is not making them alone. We feel like helping someone is to sharing our expertise and our knowledge just to help you come up with different ideas. So if we can ever be a resource or we can help you, don't think that, well, I can't get help from Capital Farm Credit because I'm not going to do it alone with them. No. And the thing is, if we don't know, because we live in a lot of these communities, these small communities, we've got a lot of resources within our network to say, hey, I don't know, but I know who does know. I know Andy. I know Donald. I know some of these people that do know the answer to your information, and we'll help connect you with those people.
That'll be great. And with some of those, some of the charts that you showed here, can we kind of go through those in a little more detail or be able to see them a little bit better at your booth back there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. That'll be great. One last chance to ask a question here in front of the whole group, because there's probably a question that a lot of you want to know the answer to, and everybody's being quiet this morning. Travis, everybody's being quiet. How about we give? Yep.
So, Donald, one of the things that Travis talked about that I want to really emphasize is if you talk to analysts like CattleFax, like Troy Applehands, Brock Thompson's over there, all kinds of people that are involved in our commodities business, they know how volatile these markets are going to be in the future. And one of the most important take-home messages you gave us there, Travis, in my opinion, is that we've got to do a good job with risk management protection. And cow-calf producers are generally reluctant to do those kind of things because they don't understand them. And the thing I love about what you said is partnership, is you guys are willing to partner to help the producer understand how those risk protection opportunities can help them. That's an area, if your calves are worth $3 a pound weighing 550 weights and you can buy LRP for that, you might want to lock that in, especially if those dudes are making you about $1,000 a head. And if this market collapses all of a sudden and you're not protected, all of a sudden you've lost a lot of equity. So those are things that I think are important we need to think about going forward in this market that we're in for the next 4 or 5 years.
Well, and that, I agree 100%. And you know, $3 feeders to me is like $140 oil, right? When there's only one direction for it to go when it gets to that point. And usually when it starts going, it goes very, very fast. And so that's exactly right. I think the biggest risk is not doing anything at all. So again, the whole point of our time together is for you guys to understand that there's all these amazing resources out there. And all you got to do is start asking those questions, and then it will just evolve into something that would be helpful for you in your operation.
Travis Soren, thank you very much. How about we give our sponsor and speaker a big hand?
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.